In this video, I will explain the rules for naming your components. We will also look at a popular naming convention that is used all over the world by programmers. In Lesson 6, we created the graphical user interface that you see here on the screen. We added various Delphi components on a form, and we changed some of their properties in the Object Inspector. If you have done the demonstrations with me, you will remember that we did not give names to any of our components. The name property is actually one of the first properties that you must change when adding components on a form. The reason it is so important to name your objects is because they are assigned default names that are not very descriptive. If your form has many components, like our form, they will be named Label 1, Label 2, Label 3, or Edit 1, Edit 2, Edit 3, and so on. This can then become very confusing later on when you must refer to these components' names in code. When assigning names to your components, you must consider a few programmatic rules that cannot be violated. Let's have a look at these rules. In our application, we added this label and edit for the first name. I'm going to use these two components as examples throughout this lecture. The default name of the first name label is Label 1, and the default name of the edit is Edit 1. Now for the first rule. Component names must be unique. In other words, no other object may have the same name. For example, I cannot name the label first name and also name the edit first name. Later, when you write code, the compiler must reference components by their names. If it was possible to assign duplicate names to the components, the compiler would not know which components you are referring to in your code if they had the same names. To make the names unique, I would rather name the label first name label and the edit first name edit. The second rule. Component names must be single words. In other words, they may not contain spaces. For example, I must remove the spaces in the names of the label and the edit, like this. The third rule is, component names may not start with a number. I cannot name the label first name label starting with a number. And I may also not call the edit first name edit with a 1 as the first character of the name. However, I may use a number anywhere else in the name. But later you will learn that it is not necessary if you apply a proper naming convention. The fourth rule, component names may not contain special characters or punctuations, like hashes, @signs, dots, commas, exclamation marks, question marks, ampersands, percentages, and so on. For example, if I try to assign the names on the screen to my label and edit, Delphi will produce an error. You may use an underscore in the name to separate two words, but later in this video you will also learn that it is not necessary when you apply a proper naming convention. And that's the rules. When you violate any of these rules, you will get an error. However, there are also conventions that you can follow to make your component names even more descriptive and easy to use. A convention is not a rule. Therefore, you will not get errors if you don't follow a convention. A convention is the way that we conventionally assign names to objects, and it makes it easy and convenient to read your code and to identify your objects. Firstly, the names that you assign to your components must be descriptive. When you have to refer to a component's name in code, it is much easier to remember it by a descriptive name. Let's look at our label and edit again. The caption on the label is first name, so a good descriptive name for it will be first name label. The edit will be first name edit because it will take the user's first name as input. Secondly, component names must be in camel case. Look at the way that I'm writing the word camel case. The first part only has lowercase characters, and the second part starts with an uppercase C. Now let's apply this to our label and edit. The label's name has three parts. They are first and name and label. The word first is in the front, so all the letters of first must be in lowercase. The second part is the word name. We must change it to start with a capital N, like this. This name also has a third part. That is the word label. We also start the word label with an uppercase L. If we add more words, they will all start with uppercase letters. It is only the first part in the name that contains only lowercase characters. When you apply this convention to the edit, it will be named first name edit, like I show it here. Thirdly, you can apply a very popular convention called the Hungarian naming convention. It works like this. People have names and surnames or family names. In programming, an object's family name or surname is the class name that it was created from. For example, the first name label's family name or surname is the word label, and the first name edit's family name is edit. In some places in the world, people use their family names or surnames first when they introduce themselves. The super spy 007 normally introduces himself like this: I'm Bond, James Bond. But if he was Hungarian, he would introduce himself by saying, I'm Bond, Bond James. Now, with that in mind, if we move our label's family name to the front, it will be label first name, and the edit will be edit first name. Notice that we still apply all the rules and we still write it in camel case. Now for the last thing. Instead of using the full family name or surname in the front, we shorten it to 3 letters. For example, label will just be LBL and edit will be EDT. The 3-letter prefix is the first part of the entire name. It is therefore written in lowercase letters. Later, when we write code, you will see that these prefixes make it easier for us to identify our components in code. Now, let's look at our form again. I will list the prefixes of some of the components that we placed on the form. Please write it down somewhere and memorize the prefixes. Let's start with the form. We already named it FRM contact in lesson 5. So, FRM is the prefix for the form. We have a few panels on our form. The prefix for a panel's name is PNL. So a descriptive name for this panel will be PNL personal information. We also have a few labels on the form. I mentioned already that the label's prefix is LBL. This label's name will therefore be LBL first name. The prefix for an edit is EDT, so a suitable name for this edit will be EDT first name. I've seen a few prefixes for combo boxes in my career as a programmer. I've seen CMB, CBX, and I've also seen CBO. You must use what your teammates are using, or the way that it is asked by your teacher. In some of the school manuals, I've seen CBX is used as the prefix for combo box names. So a descriptive name for this combo box will be CBX gender. The spin edit's prefix is SED. So this spin edit can be called SED age. This image can be called IMG photo. So IMG is the prefix for images. A checkbox's prefix is CHK. A suitable name for this checkbox is CHK sent newsletter. A rich edit's prefix is RED. So we can call this rich edit RED output because it will display output to the user. Then we also have this button. A button's prefix is BTN. So we call this button BTN display. A bitmap button's prefix is BMB. This bitmap button can therefore be called BMB close. There are hundreds of other components in Delphi. We will not look at all of them, but here are some that you may also use later in my courses. A timer's prefix is TMR, like TMR clock. A memo's prefix is MEM, like MEM summary. A radio button's prefix is RAD, like RAD paid. A groupbox prefix is GRP, like GRP payment methods. A shape's prefix is SHP, like SHP circle. Look at this list again. See how I apply the rules and conventions in all the names. Make a note of this before watching the next video. In the next video we will continue with the project that we created in previous lessons. I will demonstrate how to assign names to all the components we placed on the form. I'll talk to you again in the next video.